Good morning. Welcome everyone to another webinar from Openbravo. My name is Jeff Nairn and I work for Openbravo on the Enterprise Solutions side. To help give this presentation today, I'm privileged to have Martin Tromp, Director of Product Management at Openbravo.
Thank you, Jeff. Welcome. Nice to be here.
Okay. And Isham Lalou, Managing Partner of frePPLe.
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Martin.
Okay. Now, for those who don't know, frePPLe is a leading provider of open source software, and last month frePPLe and Openbravo unveiled a strategic partnership to help retailers optimize the execution of their retail operations with advanced planning capabilities. We have invited Isham, who is a supply chain expert, to help explain how advanced planning software can give businesses a competitive advantage. We will not talk in too much detail about the frePPLe solution today, because in 2 weeks' time we'll have another webinar that demonstrates the specific capabilities of frePPLe and how they integrate with Openbravo. Now, we would like today's webinar to be highly interactive, so we encourage questions and feedback. You can ask a question or leave feedback at any time. You do not have to wait until the presentation is finished. We will try to answer your questions at the end of the webinar. Now, this webinar is structured in 2 parts. Part 1 will describe some of the challenges facing retailers and how proper planning can reduce those challenges. Then in Part 2, we hand over to Isham, who will explain how advanced planning software works. But let's start looking at the supply chain challenges facing retailers today. Over to you, Martin.
Thanks very much, Jeff, for the introduction. Good. My first slide, supply chain challenges for omnichannel retailers. Customers' expectations for seamless omnichannel shopping experience and the growth of cross-channel fulfillment are obliging retailers to revamp supply chains that were designed for a simpler world. Along with integrating multi-directional inventory flows, stores must manage increasing numbers of SKUs and product assortments, longer supply chains, shorter seasonal cycles, and special promotions like Black Friday recently. So there's a lot more complexity in retail operations than there used to be, and demand is a lot less predictable. So how to predict the unpredictable? According to a survey by RSR Research, unpredictable demand was the most common business challenge facing retailers, which is why it is so important to have good demand forecasting tools to mitigate the effect of this increasing variability in demand. I briefly wanted to mention a problem that is often ignored but has grown to be quite significant now. That is the forecasting challenges created by cross-channel fulfillment. Retailers traditionally feed their planning systems with data on where demand is fulfilled, not where it was generated. So 30 years ago, the demand and fulfillment happened in the same place, store, simple. But now, customer may place an order online and pick it up in the store, or a store associate may order a product on behalf of a customer and have it delivered at the customer's home. The range of options is growing each day, and the growth of cross-channel fulfillment complicates forecasting. So why is demand forecasting so important? Demand forecasting is the starting point of a lot of processes that collectively make retailers function. If a retailer can estimate with reasonable accuracy what the demand will be for its products and services, it will be easier to forecast sales and costs. There are many processes that use projected demand forecasts. They span from long-range planning processes to execution-level processes like replenishments, with immediate impact on operations. Unfortunately, most planning tools are unable to handle the complexity required to make demand forecasting more accurate. And in addition, there is rarely one version of the truth. Retailers routinely use many different demand forecasts to drive their processes for planning and execution. So they have plans for pricing, plans for assortment planning, for replenishment, and so on. And those plans are not aligned. Because different departments spend their energy on creating on their own these demand forecasts rather than using a central forecast, there's a substantial duplication of effort and cost. And then in addition, each department will have their own level of maturity in creating a forecast, which means dealing with a large variety of forecasts, with each one claiming to be more accurate than the other. These misaligned plans based on disparate demand forecasts frequently result into assortments that nobody wants and inventory that must be discounted, scrapped. Which is why advanced planning solutions are essential if you want to create a good centralized demand forecasting function. With the right planning tools, you can not only better functionally align your business, but reduce cost of operations and achieve many other benefits, which I will explain later. So what is exactly advanced planning? Advanced planning solutions that exist in the marketplace today integrate several key methods to generate more accurate forecasts, which can be used to set smarter sales objectives and then plan inventory levels and replenishment strategy accordingly. The main applications for advanced planning software in retail are demand forecasting, inventory planning, and distribution planning. The first, demand forecasting, is about business intelligence and historical sales data to determine what products will sell, in what quantities, when and where they will sell the most. In general, there are two types of forecasting. It's the qualitative methods that rely on expert opinion, including sales staff, customers, and community curators. And there's the quantitative methods relying on statistical and data analysis of historical sales and market data. Then there's inventory planning. It's the process of determining the optimal quantity of timing of inventory is needed to support sales targets, seasonal changes, and promotions. And finally, the distribution planning, which is the process of calculating the distribution and purchase orders to fulfill the demand. Because of time limitations, I will let Hisham explain the last two applications later. I prefer now to concentrate on the demand forecasting. So in today's highly competitive retailing sector, proper demand forecasting is an essential tool if retailers are to devise more effective pricing strategies and manage their inventory and staffing more effectively. But before we talk about the benefits and elements of demand forecasting, let's talk a little bit more about the cost of bad forecasting and bad planning. Inaccurate forecasts and poor planning can drive up costs and lead to unsuccessful promotions, out of stock and overstock situations, unnecessary markdowns, loss of sales, poor customer service, and ultimately result in reduced profit margins. In 2015 alone, out of stocks cost retailers around the world a staggering $634 billion, according to the research firm group IHL Group, while overstocks costed $472 billion. Adding the two figures together, and worldwide lost sales due to out of stocks and overstocks comes to a staggering $1.1 trillion. That equates to a reduction in revenue of almost 8% of a typical retailer. At a time when many retailers are struggling to achieve position growth rates, it's clear that retailers are missing out on enormous opportunity to improve their financial performance through better forecasting and planning. Let's see where those costs come. In the case of over-forecasting, carrying extra inventory means retailer must pay extra storage costs, and it prevents them from clearing space for new merchandise. In addition, retailers may have wasted money on hiring extra staff and transport to handle the extra volume of goods. And to avoid inventory write-offs, retailers may also feel the pressure to discount these surplus items even further, cutting into the profit margin even further. Here I wanted to briefly mention the sad tale of BHS, UK clothing and homewares retailer, which went out of business this summer. The administrators running the bankrupt company organized a closing down sale to sell off the remaining stock that was left in its 163 stores. The sale started well, so the administrators felt confident enough to order new stock to keep the surplus coming into the stores. They did this both to ensure that the shelves did not look too empty and to help raise additional revenues to pay off the creditors. With hindsight, that was a mistake, as the new stock, which was not BHS product, did not sell as well as the original stock. Stores had to stay open beyond the original deadline to try to shift the new unsold stock, so running up additional costs. It's an unusual example. but it illustrates very well the problems of forecasting demand, particularly for items where you don't have any historical data. Stockouts turn into lost sales. That's because in today's omnichannel era, customers are much less inclined to wait for an out-of-stock product to be replenished. If a product is out of stock, shoppers can now check on their mobile phone to see if the product is available from a rival store across the street or from an online store. In an omnichannel world, a lost sale is just a few clicks or swipes away. So stockouts damage not just your bottom line, but also your brand. The obvious question to ask now is why, given the detrimental effects of poor forecasting, aren't retailers giving it more attention? Retailers, and indeed all businesses that handle stock, today still rely too much on manual ordering and intuition to plan their business. Often, the only tool they use is Microsoft Excel. A survey by Boston Retail Partners in 2016 found that 71% of companies do not have formal omnichannel demand planning processes. Nevertheless, many acknowledge the growing importance of proper planning systems. 41% of those retailers in the Boston Retail Partners survey saying that they were ready to upgrade their omnichannel demand planning systems within 2 years. So how to predict the future? Well, of course, the title of the slide is a joke. No one can predict the future, but it is possible to forecast future consumer actions with some confidence by evaluating past revenue, deciphering sales patterns, and analyzing buying behavior. The objective for retailer in using demand forecasting is to identify opportunities to drive sales, and then manage orders, stock and shipment allocation at the store and SKU levels to meet those objectives. Demand forecasting allows retailers to predict and meet consumer demands while controlling pricing and inventory. This is critical because warehousing excess inventory adds overhead costs while understocking leads to lost revenue. So by improving demand forecasting, retailers will experience fewer stockouts, improved margins, and more solid overall business results. So how do we do this? Well, the second part of this presentation will explain in more detail. So here let me just summarize by saying a wide range of statistical forecasting models are available to streamline the demand planning process. Often, companies will select only one of these methods, which they think is the most relevant. However, they could consider many factors, some of which we will discuss now. With so many factors impacting shopping behavior and increasing pressure on profit margins, retailers must focus on better understanding the demand for merchandise based on historical sales data. So what should a demand forecast take into account? Obviously, market trends, product life cycles, seasons, locations, and the broader economy can all affect demand frequency and levels. In addition, demand is influenced by one-off factors, such as competing promotions, geopolitical factors, and operational, manufacturing, or logistical errors that affect sales. So retailers need a tool that lets them adjust the demand history to filter out the exceptional demand outliers that won't repeat in the future, such as hurricanes, for example. One key factor is the weather. It goes without saying that weather and seasons can have a big impact on demand, and not just for apparel retailers. Sporting goods, do-it-yourself, almost every sector has product lines whose demand is influenced heavily by the weather. So weather sensitivity typically plays a big role in demand forecasting for retailers. For example, the unusual warm weather in the UK through October this year heavily affected clothing sales at Debenhams, UK department store. Indeed, the drop in sales of winter clothing was so significant that clothing represented less than half of its sales for the first time in the store's history. There are a lot more factors that affect the demand of a job. A good demand forecasting solution is to take in hard data from an ERP system and do the number crunching without requiring too much human intervention. So what are the benefits of better planning? Well, there are a lot of benefits, as you can see on this slide. Advanced planning solutions help you improve your supply chain and inventory management, so that you can order and stock inventory based on the season and location where items the most are likely to sell. You can optimize order frequency and set appropriately safety stock quantities. And very importantly, you reduce out of stocks and overstocks, which translates into improved customer satisfaction and better margin and higher sales. With a better understanding of how much you expect to sell, retailers can manage pricing strategies better and optimize stock orders, warehousing, and fulfillment needs, as well as the staff needed to support the sales objectives. More accurate long-term forecast can improve cash flow and financial planning. It gives the company a framework for setting realistic goals for its sales. Demand forecasting as a competitive weapon. Finally, here are some concrete benefits that analyst firms Gartner Group and AMR Research have obtained from studying businesses that adopt a demand-driven supply chain. How does Openbravo get you there? With the new demand forecasting capabilities now available in Openbravo, thanks to our partner frePPLe, retailers can easily integrate demand forecasting in their planning cycles to achieve business objectives, identify growth opportunities and growth while mitigating costly risks for retailers. And that, Jeff, concludes my part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. That's very informative, very interesting. I imagine a lot of you out there have experienced those problems we've talked about. Now I want to hand over to Isham Lalou, managing partner of frePPLe, who, as I explained earlier, he's going to tell us how the frePPLe advanced planning solution works. Over to you, Isham.
Thank you, Jeff. So before classifying the different planning processes we have encountered in the retail world, let's define first what we mean by planning process. Actually, planning process is about taking the appropriate decision to satisfy the customer demand at lower cost. And there are two options to meet the customer demand. First, you can rebalance or transship your stock among the different warehouses you own. You identify where you have some excess and you transfer this stock to warehouses facing shortages. In the supply chain world, these stock transfers are called distribution orders, as you are distributing your stock across your locations. The second option is to generate POs, purchase orders, to your suppliers if your stock is not big enough to meet the customer demand. And planning is about generating distribution orders and purchase orders for the right time, the right location, and the right quantity to meet the customer demand at lower cost. So back to the slide. The planning processes we have encountered can be classified as follows. So undisciplined, there is no real plan, no formal planning process, like decisions are taken with very limited visibility. Then we have the reactive planning process, where there exists a manual planning process, typically made with Excel, most often with data that are not accurate or not up to date. This type of planning is called the reactive, as the plan is reacting to events rather than anticipating these events. Then we have the proactive plan, where the plan is calculated by a software with up-to-date data. The plan is shared between the different entities of the company, and it becomes an asset and a strength for the company. And then you have the optimized plan, where the proactive plan is completely mastered, and the focus is now on optimizing the KPIs. These kinds of plans give you a substantial advantage on your competitors. Now let me give you an example of the different questions a planner has to answer in his daily job, assuming he or she is calculating the plan on a spreadsheet. So first we have the short-term visibility questions, such as which purchase order should be expedited, when can we ship this new order, which orders risk to be shipped late, and which supplier shall I choose for that purchase order. And then we have the midterm visibility questions, such as what should be my safety stock for that product. There we can see that the planner doesn't want to face any stockouts or back order for a product and starts thinking of calculating a safety stock quantity. Then we have the long-term visibility questions such as, what quantity will I sell in 6 months from now? And these are usually questions allowing the retailer to take strategic decisions such as product addition or end of life on the catalog list, warehouse selection for a product, etc. So what is frePPLe? I will now introduce frePPLe, that is an APS. APS stands for Advanced Planning and Scheduling Tool. It is a software that will optimally calculate the short-term and mid-term plan. This software is integrated with other software, usually an ERP, and it needs to retrieve the latest situation from the ERP, such as the on-hand, the on-order, the customer orders. It needs this to calculate the distribution orders and the purchase orders that will be sent back to the ERP for execution. To clarify what an APS is, let's mention what an APS is not. First, it's not a business intelligence system that will monitor the past to calculate KPIs using powerful reporting capabilities. It is not an MES, a manufacturing execution system that will collect in real time your present production activity on the shop floor. It is not an ERP that keeps track of the present situation, such as transactional data. An APS is about future. It will calculate your future transactions based on past and present information. I will now introduce frePPLe. I just want to go through the processes that frePPLe covers. So first, based on the customer demand history, it will calculate a forecast. This forecast can be manually reviewed by a planner. Then frePPLe will apply some forecast netting, meaning that it will subtract from the forecast the actual already confirmed customer orders, making sure we are not double counting forecast and customer orders. I'll go through this a bit later. Then frePPLe will perform some inventory optimization by calculating optimal safety stock and reorder quantities. The reorder quantity is the recommended order quantity to your supplier for a purchase order. Last but not least, the distribution planning module will calculate the supply plan, taking into consideration all the constraints, such as supplier lead time and capacity, material availability, etc. The output of the distribution planning is the recommended purchase order and distribution orders to meet the customer demand. Now that you have the full picture of the processes covered by frePPLe, let's focus on each of them to give more details on how they work. So the first process treated by frePPLe is the forecasting process. It consists of anticipating the customer demand based on the history. frePPLe implements all the standard forecasting methods found in the literature. It allows to detect patterns such as trend or seasonality. For every forecasting method it implements, frePPLe will calculate the lowest forecast error in order to select the most appropriate method. Once the forecast is calculated, the planner can of course review it, modify any order quantity in the past, so this is the outlier correction, and can also override any calculated value in the future, or even force the selection of the forecast algorithm. As an example, you can see on this slide the demand history that is in green and the calculated forecast in red. So frePPLe has detected a seasonality in the summer and is going to reproduce this same seasonality pattern in the upcoming summer. Another very interesting feature of frePPLe is the fact that the forecast can be computed at any hierarchical level. So assuming you have classified your products, your warehouses, or your customers hierarchically, it is possible to calculate the forecast at any level and then disaggregate it to the lower levels. So we can take a quick example to understand how this works. If all your warehouses are hierarchically ranked by continent, then by country, and your products are also ranked by type, let's assume, for instance, that you are an alcohol retailer. You could set all your wines in the wine category and all your beers in the beer category. Then you can decide to forecast all your beers at Europe level. The software will calculate that forecast using all the demand history for any beer order you receive for any European country. Then once the forecast is calculated, the software will disaggregate that forecast among all the European countries and among all the beer brands you are selling. So calculating the forecast at an aggregated level allows to more easily detect some patterns in the forecast, such as trend or seasonality. I just also want to mention that the forecast can also be edited at aggregated level, and the modification would then be propagated at the lowest levels. Let's introduce now the forecast netting module. It's important to understand that when an APS tool generates a plan, the plan covers both the forecast and the actual customer orders. So if a customer order has already been, if a customer order has been correctly forecasted, then planning both the forecast and the customer order would result in planning twice this customer order. So as a result, the forecast netting is a process that subtracts the customer orders from the calculated gross forecast, and this results in the net forecast. So if we take the example of the slide, we have a gross forecast of 100, and we've already received an order of 20 matching that gross forecast. Then frePPLe will plan the order of 20 plus the net forecast, and the net forecast is going to be 100 minus 20, which is 80. So it's important to understand also that the long-term demand is usually composed of the forecast, while the short-term demand is composed of customer orders. The inventory planning model of frePPLe will calculate the safety stock and the reorder quantity for an SKU. Regarding the safety stock, there are 3 different methods that can be used. It's up to the planner to select the appropriate one. So the first method is the service level. The service level is the percentage of time you can fulfill a customer demand on time. So if you are able to fulfill 9 orders out of 10, your service level would be 90%. The higher your service level stock will be, the better your service level should be. Sorry, let me rephrase this. I want to say the higher your safety stock will be, the better your service level should be. So therefore, if you input to frePPLe a desired service level, the software is able to compute what your safety stock should be to reach that service level. The second method is a fixed quantity input by the planner. So for instance, I want for this SKU a fixed quantity of 15 as safety stock. So fixed quantity. And the third method is the number of forecast period. So a planner can specify that the safety stock should cover 3 months of forecast, for instance. Now, regarding the reorder quantity, again, the reorder quantity is the recommended order quantity to your supplier, just a reminder. So there are also 3 different methods to compute it. The first method is based on the Wilson formula. It is calculating the economic order quantity, taking into consideration several inputs such as a fixed order cost, the part cost, or the annual holding cost, all these kind of information. And the second and the third methods are the same as the ones for the safety stock, that is either a fixed quantity or a fixed number of forecast periods. And again, as we've already seen it for the forecast, all the calculated safety stock and reorder quantities can be overridden by the planner for every SKU and for every period of time. The distribution planning process is the last process covered by frePPLe for the resale markets. It will solve a finite capacity problem to calculate the distribution orders and purchase orders fulfilling the demand. The demand being the safety stock plus the net forecast plus the customer orders. First, the planner can specify distribution lanes between warehouses for a set of products. So frePPLe, based on these distribution lanes, would then automatically generate distribution orders, transferring the stock from location having excess to locations suffering from transferring the stock from location having excess to locations suffering for shortages. Once the distribution orders are generated, it's time now to generate the POs. And to generate the PO, the solver can take several constraints as inputs. First, the supplier lead time is of course a major input to the solver. Then the solver can also handle priorities among suppliers, assuming you have multiple suppliers for a product. There are several rules that can be implemented for the supplier selection, such as priority, product availability, item price, etc. The solver will also take into consideration the minimum or multiple order quantities when generating the purchase order. And it's also possible to define a capacity for a supplier, such as 1,000 parts maximum per month. And the supplier capacity can be entered for any dates. So you can therefore stipulate that the capacity for August, for instance, is 0. In this way, you can model the supplier vacations. In this diagram, we summarize the functions and data transfer from an ERP to an APS and vice versa. So if we read the diagram from left to right, we can see that the ERP is sending the static data to the APS, the static data being the products, the warehouses, suppliers, etc. Then the ERP also sends the transactional or dynamic data, the dynamic data being the customer orders, the on-hand, the on-order, the on-order being the confirmed purchase orders. With this data, the APS software is able to compute a plan and will generate both purchase and distribution orders that will be sent back to the ERP. This information can also be used by some business intelligence BI tool to generate reports or calculating KPIs, either planning KPIs or financial KPIs. So if we summarize what we saw, we can easily understand that an APS will bring your planning process to a new level of maturity, as it has strong impact on your business and on your ROIs. First, an APS will improve your planner productivity, allowing him to focus on other tasks. Then an APS will reduce your inventory, meaning that it will increase your cash flow. Your customers will be happy as it will improve your delivery date accuracy, and you will be happy as you will wisely respond to market demand. And an APS is also about helping you taking some long-term decisions, as it has simulation capabilities that let you test different scenarios, helping you into taking strategic decisions. And that concludes my presentation. Back to you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Isham. Thank you for revealing some of the mysteries behind advanced planning software. So, time to sum up. What should you take away from this presentation? As we said right at the beginning, customer demand is a lot less predictable in today's omnichannel era. Cross-channel fulfillment complicates demand forecasting even further. The consequences of bad forecasting, I'm sure you're all familiar with, are out of stocks, overstocks, which leads to customer dissatisfaction and poor financial performance. Advanced planning solutions like frePPLe, the one we talked about today, help retailers improve in key areas such as demand forecasting, inventory planning, and distribution planning. And the benefits are concrete benefits. They include reduced inventory, improved fulfillment, and reduced cash cycle. At this point, I just wanted to see if we have any questions. I'm going to wait a couple of minutes to see if anyone wants to write down a question. As I said at the beginning, in 2 weeks' time, on December the 15th, Openbravo will run another webinar, a hands-on demo that will show you how easily it is to add advanced planning capabilities into your retail operations thanks to the integration with Openbravo. So if you want to see the frePPLe advanced planning software in action, you can register for that webinar on the Openbravo website, or you can contact us directly. I think we have one question here who's just come in. A participant wants to know more about the simulation capabilities of an advanced planning system. That's a question for you, Isham, I think.
Yes, Jeff. Okay, so actually in frePPLe you have the capability to duplicate your production data in a kind of completely separate sandbox and to run whatever scenarios you want. So let me give you an example. You take your production data, so as I say, you copy everything, like this is of course automated in frePPLe, you copy everything and you have this sandbox. Let's say you want to add a warehouse in your somewhere in some country, and you want to see how it will affect actually your lead times and how fast you will be able to respond to your customer order with this new warehouse. You can do such things in frePPLe, like in a sandbox, taking the last accurate up-to-date data, and you can run this kind of simulation in frePPLe. You can do whatever you want in the data. Like you can change the price of an item and see how it will impact the supplier selection. All these kind of things can be done in frePPLe.
Great. Okay. We don't have any more questions, so I think at this point I'd just like to say thank you to our two presenters, to Martin from Openbravo and to Isham from the frePPLe. Thank you to both for taking the time to be with us today.
You're welcome, Jeff. Pleasure.
And finally, if anyone wishes to contact us about this webinar or the forthcoming hands-on demo, I will leave this slide on the screen for a couple of minutes. Otherwise, thanks to everyone for attending this Openbravo webinar, and we hope to see you soon in the near future. Thank you.